sexy people of the internet. That's right, I'm talking to you. Welcome back to another album review from Dave and from Duncan at Metal Epidemic. For this week's review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from UK Atmospheric Sludge trio Torpor. The band's new album, ABSCISSION, will be released on September 15th on Human Worth. No conversations discussing who are amongst the heaviest of UK metal acts can be complete without mentioning Bristol-based sludge trio Torpor. Over the past 10 years, this colossal band have been obliterating stages across the UK and mainland Europe, leaving behind an impressive discography along the way. Rising London-based label Human Worth proudly present Torpor's third full-length album, ABSCISSION. ABSCISSION sees Torpor distilling all their greatest strengths and influences into their tightest and leanest set of songs to date. ABSCISSION is a paean to earth-shattering tones, subtle, detailed textures, immersive sound design, and most importantly, absolutely crushing heaviness. For their third album, Torpor were compelled to withdraw into the bleak and elemental vistas of rural Wales, embracing isolation and solitude in order to craft this autumnal sonic landscape. The trio brought producer and frequent collaborator Wayne Adams, whose credits include Wallowing, Green Lung, Possessor, and more, out of his London City studio to work at Giant Wafer Studios. The album was then mastered by James Plotkin. Torpor gave themselves the creative space to leave lyrics and sections of the songs open to be completed in the windswept Welsh hillscape, allowing the narrative of these songs to expand and breathe in their surroundings. Some vocal takes were captured outside at night, embracing the eerie darkness, evoking stream of consciousness and permission for sonic freedom. The title ABSCISSION refers to the natural cycle of trees de-leafing from autumn into winter. Specifically, ABSCISSION is the cutting off and letting go of spent leaves, part of the cycle of maturity and renewal, which is reflected sonically and structurally by the flow of the 5 slow-burning meditations that make up this record. The album grew from a place of personal loss and disappearance and became an exploration of the different spaces opening up within. Our main guiding principle through the writing and recording was the idea of this psychological journey and how through our individual processes of meditation, contemplation and catharsis, loss and identity are transformed. We've always worked by allowing our experiences to converge into something new. ABSCISSION is our collective dialogue of rupture and renewal. There we go. There's your info. So, on to the album. These guys have been on my radar for a while. I don't know if you remember from back in the day, Rock and Roll Reviews time.
Last week, guy, of course, Dave.
Way back. Back in 2015, maybe, I think. We reviewed one of their albums way back then. And then they released something else after that. I think it was 2019. And then this is obviously the new release, which I was keen to hear what the band had been kind of working on over the last few years. They've always been a heavy band, like a seriously heavy band. I think the album we reviewed was From Nothing Comes Everything, which I think was 2015. And even back then, almost what was that, 8 years? Something like that. Am I calculating that right?
Yeah, 8 years, Dave. Your math is good.
Thank you. I'm getting older now. I'm not as quick, my math brain.
I don't want to point out, you know what I mean, but you are visibly older.
Even back then, there was something incredibly bleak about their sound. Fast forward to 2023, that sound has grown. It's gotten even bigger. It is even more, even if you can imagine, even more crushing than it was all those years ago. One of the reasons I loved that album back in 2015 was it kind of reminded me, had a kind of slight resemblance to a certain Will Haven. But as the band have gone forward, I'd say that the influence, the Will Haven kind of resemblance has kind of lessened a bit since that album. And the weight and the tone of the band sound has changed as well. And this album has another shift on it again. This one is still very imposing, but this is like utterly drenched in atmosphere. They always had a bit of that sprinkled in, kind of coating their sound. But I'd say on this album, that was the kind of one thing that really stood out, was how potent that atmosphere was on the album. The kind of tone in the album, like guitar wise, it's slightly less metallic than before. It's still like colossally sludgy and a bit kind of doomy as well, but definitely not as like kind of abrasive as the guitars on like the Rhetoric of the Image. And I think that helps. I think it might be a conscious decision. It makes it even more atmospheric. That kind of sound they're pushing on the album comes through even more. And I think it all links into the theme of the album as well, about being on a kind of psychological journey, meditation, catharsis, and also obviously the title of the album being about the kind of shift in the seasons. I think they've done a really good job of matching the recording of this album and the tones on the album with that overarching concept of the album. Also, I mean, it didn't say anything about this in the press release, but it has a little bit of a kind of post-apocalyptic feel as well at times to me. It has that kind of desolate feel to it that I kind of picked up on a couple of tracks, which it probably comes from a lot of the riffs on the album. I'd say the riffs on this one are a bit more droning and a bit more kind of thunderous, probably leaning more into the doom side of things, whereas before they're maybe a bit more sludgy. It's a bit more streamlined as well. I felt like the riffs on this album compared to the last one, not in a bad way. I think again it really kind of suits the kind of blueprint they went for on this album. I kind of found myself being more and more immersed in this album the more I listened to it. The first listen, when I got through it, I was just like, whoa, fucking hell. That was heavy. That was crushing. Just need a wee bath and a wee breather after I listened to that album again.
The two B's, a bath and a breather.
And something else.
I don't know.
I'm not going to say it. And every time I went back to the album, I kind of felt more and more immersed in it. I kind of found like with previous albums, I wasn't quite as immersed in their stuff before, and I think that was down to the kind of style of riffs, with the kind of atmosphere and the kind of doomy tempo that they've got on this one, which almost puts you under like it almost hypnotic kind of way, but it's also, I think, like the structure of the tracks as well, which they kind of weave in and out of that like really colossal heaviness, and then there's these kind of really like tranquil kind of reflection points throughout the album, where that like wave of distortion just reduces down to something cleaner, gives you a moment to kind of catch your breath, and they do that a few times throughout the album, which doesn't sound like a lot, but there's only 5 tracks on this, and they are all of a kind of decent length, except like one track, I think track 4, Carbon, which is the kind of like noisy, almost industrial type track with lots of feedback and kind of tribal drums and like kind of low growls and stuff as well. But that track kind of sets up the final track of the album perfectly, Island of Abandonment, which is fucking awesome. Probably my favorite track on the release. It's the longest track at about 11 minutes or so, and like that track, what a fucking voyage that track takes you on. It's a real like slow burn kind of build into this like giant inferno of sludge and doom and post metal, which has a really incredible kind of peak in the middle of the track, but there's also some really like expansive kind of clean vocals as well towards the end, almost, and I hope I don't piss the band off, almost a little bit kind of Burton C. Bell like in a way for some reason. Like that's what I could hear when I was listening to it, but it makes the track even more imposing, but it also felt like a really satisfying end to the release as well. It's not the only time they use the vocals, or clean vocals, sorry, on the album. They do use them earlier in the album as well, but very sparingly, just a little bit to kind of alter the tone.
They're more hidden in the mix as well. They're more like atmosphere in the background as opposed to being just up front like they are in the end.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I think it works really well, just alters the tone just that little bit. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I think I've enjoyed their albums prior to this, but I think this could be my favourite Torpor album to date. Their previous albums, as I said, were a little bit more kind of led by the riffs and the kind of cool sludge grooves, but this one felt like it had like a lot more depth and substance to it. Probably the biggest emotional streak they've given on an album to date as well. It flows really well. Like it doesn't feel disjointed or jarring in any way. That the tempo pretty much stays the same, being a kind of sludgy doom album, but I think the way that the tracks kind of ebb and flow, giving you these moments of light and amongst the heaviness, it just kind of kept me hooked in for the ride. The production on this is also fucking glorious. It sounds massive. That bass is absolute filth. There's a moment on Interior Gestures where the guitars are kind of moving into a more like kind of playing something a bit more textured. And the bass is still kind of playing the main kind of sludge riff underneath, and it just sounds so good. Like the tone they've got in that is incredible. Drums sound awesome as well. I think that the snare just cuts through everything, and the reverb they've used on the drums just kind of like linger after every hit. It sounds awesome. It's like it sounds like it's been recorded in a church or something like that. It's got that kind of real kind of ambience about it. Yeah, this is ace. I really like this. I feel like these guys do keep getting better and better. The last two albums were probably on par with each other, I felt, for different reasons. But I feel like this album has kind of moved the band into a kind of new phase. It's like a new era of the band, which kind of makes me excited for the future of what's next from Torpor. What about yourself? What did you think?
Yeah, a lot of what you've said is kind of not too far off my experience overall.
Yeah.
The way I would describe it is I think it's less an album of songs and more an experience listen.
Yeah.
And depending on my mood, I got different feelings from it by the end.
Mm-hmm.
It's been an interesting album to listen to in the last couple of days where, and to date this release, the UK is going through a mini heat wave at the moment. And this, I imagine there's a bit of probably careful planning to release this album as autumn begins.
Yeah.
But the weather outside is not cooperating with that feeling at all.
Yeah.
So I've found that I actually gravitate to it much better at nighttime when things are a bit cooler than I do in the day when things are warm. This is this sort of music you don't want to listen to on a sunny day at all. It's too gloomy and it's too imposing. It almost butts head with the weather that we're having.
Yeah.
That being said, so the first time I listened to it was over the weekend, and I'll be honest, I was floored straight away. A lot of this resonates with me in a good way, in that it reminds me of other music that I really like. And just the size and weight of it, it sounds fucking huge. So yeah, then I tried to listen to the following day, which I think was the start of the heat wave, and it just did not click with me at all. I just couldn't get comfortable listening to it. Listening to it that night though, everything was fine. So I spun it again last night for a fourth listen, which I don't usually go as many as for, but I wanted to give it its day in court. Once again, late last night when it was all dark, and I actually listened to it on the back doorstep. Like staring up at the stars, which I could see last night. It was still relatively warm, but it was nice. Like, ground was cool, and the album just synced right in with me at that point. It's a kind of close your eyes and let yourself drift off.
Yeah.
I don't think the band should take a Burton C. Bell comparison as a bad thing. Burton C. Bell can't do the vocals live. That might be why it's a bad thing. However, there is a degree of almost opera and theatre to his melodies that is definitely in this one. And the first time they started to really hit me in the melody capacity is track 2, As Shadows Follow Body. And they were layered right into the point that that instantly took the in-ears out and put the good headphones on.
Yeah.
And kind of focused right on it. And it was really well layered, and it sounded huge, and it was a clever use of technique. And I was a little bit aggrieved the first time I was listening to it that we didn't go back to it really again until the end, where actually get an elongated, almost 4-minute closeout on the album that kind of reintroduces melody in the guitars, and in particular melody in the vocals. And it's actually very clever placement to do that. Like you say, the album kind of weirdly ends it's not a happy place, but it's a place of melody, which, you know, kind of leaves you on a tone which is not reminiscent of the majority of the album. And the guitar work here is great. It's very, very, very doom sludge. At times reminded me a little bit of Conan, without like properly, you know, they're not the same sort of band.
Yeah.
But those moments where everything just sounds fucking huge and the space in between notes feels like a chasm or an abyss you could be swallowed by. It's kind of awesome. I actually think they're really, really, really good at crafting longer songs. The track that to me is the disappointment on this one is Carbon, which is the, like you mentioned before, the kind of weird instrumentally, electronic-y, industrial, all things that I should love, industrial sort of track. I kind of know why it's there. I kind of know what its purpose is, but I actually think you could remove it from this and just have it as a 4-track album, and it wouldn't be detrimental at all. I don't necessarily think it adds anything. Don't think it takes anything away either. But it kind of feels like if they are telling a story specifically about the way that nature consumes itself during autumn, a track like that kind of makes sense. But to me, it kind of felt, like I say, almost like a needless step. That being said, very much like yourself, the final track, clocking at 11 minutes, Island of Abandonment, is incredible. It's really, I think this is where the band shine on multiple levels. I think this is where you get a full sense of all the grandeur, all the heaviness, all the confidence and all the melody, and it kind of ties everything very neatly back in together. You've also mentioned the production. I think the production is massive and there's no getting around that, and everything is really, 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 really well placed. But I think specifically one instrument we didn't really lock on too much because we talked about the melody vocals, the actual aggro vocals, which switch between a tone and a mix which is very in the front to something almost black metal-esque in the background, and the way the reverb just soaks it. I love the switch in between that. I think it's really, 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 really well done. I think it also adds a ton of character to the album, where the music might have... It might start to delve into really, really, really dark places. The vocal production kind of shifts to match it. And like I said, it's one of those production details that I just thought was very, very, very well done and very clever. Overall, I mean, it clocks in about the 40-minute mark. It's 5 tracks. It is very much an experience album for me. It's not one I'd be spinning loads, if I'm honest. But what I found was every return listen to it, I found myself acclimating to another part of a track that I maybe had kind of cruised over because I was still in awe of the bit before. That I think it's an experience listen, but I think it's several listens to gain the experience, if you know what I mean. I don't think you'll digest everything that's on here in one listen. No. I think it kind of begs you to go back and check it out a little bit more. This is really, really, really good. I don't know if I had heard them before. I know you're saying that we reviewed stuff of them before. I don't know if I did check them out. So to me, this was kind of like a clean slate, fresh listen. And there's tons of stuff on here that makes me happy. So yeah, I think definitely want to watch. Definitely, even though they've been on the go forever, definitely want to watch off the back of this album. They're doing a ton of things right. So yeah.
Nice. Okay, so scores for ABSCISSION by Torpor. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and kind of like what you were saying there, every time I went back to it, I enjoyed it a little bit more, and found it even more immersive every time I listened to it. The kind of industrially type track was the only track that I was like, it's cool, but I'm not sure that...
Reel it, you know what I mean? No, I just don't think it necessarily... It'd be different if the following track bled off it, but it doesn't really. Yeah. It's kind of more it's like an inverted palate cleanser. Like it goes to such an extreme sound that the following song, even though it is heavy, doesn't sound as heavy as it, and that kind of works to its advantage for the middle section.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out why it was kind of in there. The reason, I'm sure there's obviously a reason for it, but I wasn't sure if it was maybe one of the the different kind of themes they were using of meditation or catharsis. If it was supposed to be kind of maybe linked to something like that, possibly. But that aside, thoroughly enjoyed this. I thought the production was fantastic. It is one of those ones that does benefit just a really good set of headphones. Like you say, sitting in the dark, listening to it is perfect. I enjoyed this a lot. I'm probably going to go a 4.5 on this one. What about yourself?
I'm marginally below you. I'm a 4. I think this is really, really, really good, and I would love to see them in a small, sweaty, dark, claustrophobic, smoky venue sometime soon. So hopefully they get up, and hopefully that venue they play has reinforced floors, because I imagine the rumbles coming off those fucking cabinets will be huge.
Yeah, for sure. So Torpor's ABSCISSION, it comes out on September 15th on Human Worth. Links below to the band, to the pre-order and stuff. Check that out. Let us know what you think. Happy to hear your thoughts and opinions on it. That is the review. Thank you for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.